The Whispering Lake. In the quiet town of Ravenshallow, nestled deep in the heart of a sprawling forest, there was a lake. Shimmering and placid by day, it transformed into a thing of legend by night. The locals called it Whispering Lake because of the eerie sounds that echoed from its shores, sounds that many swore were voices. Some claimed they were the cries of the drowned, others the murmurs of ancient spirits. Regardless of the tales, one thing was certain: no one lingered near the lake after dark. Despite the warnings and eerie lore, the Fletcher family thought the lake was idyllic. Alan and his wife, Marissa, had moved to Ravenshallow with their 10-year-old daughter, Lily, in search of peace after years of city chaos. The lakeside house they purchased was old but charming, with a wraparound porch and large bay windows offering breathtaking views of the water. For the Fletchers, it seemed like the perfect escape. The whispers started on their third night. Alan was sitting on the porch, sipping coffee under the glow of a full moon. The lake was unusually still, its surface a perfect mirror of the star-filled sky. Then he heard a soft, almost imperceptible murmur that seemed to rise from the water. He frowned, leaning forward. It was faint but distinct, like a distant conversation. At first, he dismissed it as the wind through the trees, but then he heard his name. Alan. He froze, his mug trembling in his hand. The voice was faint, almost tender, but unmistakably real. He stood up, scanning the shoreline, but saw nothing. Shaking off the chill that ran down his spine, he chalked it up to exhaustion and went inside. The next morning, Lily was unusually quiet at breakfast. She pushed her cereal around with her spoon, her gaze fixed on the table. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Marissa asked. "I made a friend," Lily said softly. Alan and Marissa exchanged a glance. "That's great, honey," Alan said. "What's their name?" "She didn't say, but she lives in the lake." Alan felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "What do you mean in the lake?" Lily shrugged. "She talks to me when I'm near the water. She says she's lonely." Marissa smiled nervously. "Maybe you imagined it, sweetie. There's no one living in the lake." "She's real," Lily insisted. "She said I should visit her." Alan felt the knot tighten. "Lily, I don't want you going near the lake without us, okay? It's dangerous." Lily pouted but nodded. That night, Alan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying Lily's words. Around midnight, he heard the whispers again. This time they were louder, more insistent. He slipped out of bed and peered through the window. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, perfectly calm. And then he saw it. A figure stood on the shore, barely visible in the pale light. It was a woman. Her long hair draped over her shoulders, her white dress glowing faintly. She was staring directly at the house. The next few days were tense. Lily continued talking about her lake friend, and the whispers grew louder each night. Alan and Marissa tried to ignore them, but the unease was palpable. Then, one evening, everything changed. It was a cloudy night, the kind where the darkness felt heavier. Alan was in the living room, reading, when he realized Lily wasn't in the house. Panic surged through him as he and Marissa searched every room. She was nowhere to be found. "The lake," Alan whispered, dread pooling in his chest. They ran outside, calling her name. The forest was silent except for the crunch of their frantic footsteps. When they reached the shore, Alan's heart nearly stopped. Lily was standing knee-deep in the water, staring at something just beyond the surface. "Lily!" Marissa screamed. Lily turned slowly, her face blank. "She says I have to go with her." "No!" Alan yelled, rushing into the water. He grabbed Lily, pulling her back to shore. As he carried her away, he glanced back and saw the figure again, the woman in white. Her expression twisted into a mask of rage. She reached out toward him, her fingers unnaturally long, but before Alan could react, she disappeared into the depths. Lily was inconsolable, sobbing about how her friend would be angry. Over the next few days, she became distant, her once bright demeanor replaced by a sullen silence. Alan and Marissa didn't know what to do. Desperate for answers, Alan visited the town's library to research the lake's history. What he found chilled him to the bone. In the 1800s, a woman named Eleanor Darrow had lived near the lake. She was rumored to be a witch, practicing dark rituals and communing with spirits. When a series of mysterious deaths occurred in the area, the townsfolk blamed Eleanor. One night, a mob dragged her to the lake, tied her to a tree, and drowned her. Her final words, according to legend, were a curse. "I will never be alone again." Since then, the lake had been plagued by strange disappearances and sightings of a woman in white. The whispers, it seemed, were Eleanor's way of luring new companions to her watery grave. Alan returned home, determined to protect his family. That night he stayed awake, keeping watch over Lily's room. Around 2 a.m., he heard the whispers again. This time they were inside the house. He bolted upright, his heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the halls. He grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the sound. It led him to the living room, where Lily was standing, her eyes glazed over. "She's here," Lily said in a monotone voice. "No, she's not," Alan said firmly, pulling Lily close. "She can't have you." The room grew colder, and the whispers coalesced into a single, chilling voice. "She belongs to me." Alan turned and saw Eleanor standing in the doorway. Her eyes were black pits, her smile a grotesque mockery of humanity. "You can't have her," Alan shouted. Eleanor tilted her head, her expression darkening. "Then join her." The windows shattered and the room filled with icy water. Alan clung to Lily, struggling to stay afloat as the water rose around them. Just when he thought they would drown, Marissa appeared, holding a silver locket and heirloom passed down from her grandmother. "Leave us alone," Marissa screamed, holding the locket aloft. Eleanor recoiled, her form flickering like a dying flame. With a final, blood-curdling scream, she vanished, and the water receded as quickly as it had appeared. The Fletchers moved away the next morning, leaving the house and the lake behind. They never spoke of the incident again, but the scars remained. Lily refused to go near any body of water, and Alan was haunted by nightmares of Eleanor's face. Years later, the house by Whispering Lake was abandoned, left to rot under the weight of its dark history. The whispers, however, never stopped. Travelers passing through Raven Shallow often reported hearing their names carried on the wind, followed by a faint, mournful cry. "I will never be alone again." The watcher in the window? The house was old, but that was its charm. Built in the early 1900s, it had stood the test of time with its weathered facade, creaking floorboards, and intricate woodwork. To Lisa and Brian, a young couple eager to escape the bustle of city life, it was perfect. Nestled in the rolling countryside of New Jersey, it offered the solitude they craved. Little did they know, it also came with something else. The first letter arrived just 3 days after they moved in. It was a plain white envelope slipped into their mailbox, addressed simply to the new occupants. Inside was a handwritten note on unlined paper. "Welcome to your new home. I have been watching it for years, waiting for you. My family has watched this house for decades, and now it is my turn. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies beneath?" There was no signature, no return address. Lisa laughed it off nervously, chalking it up to a local prankster. Brian agreed, though uneasily. They decided not to let it bother them. But the letters didn't stop. Each week, a new note arrived. They grew more unsettling, more specific. "I see you enjoy your time in the upstairs bedroom. The view from the window is spectacular, isn't it? But be careful at night. Not all who look out see the stars." Lisa's hands trembled as she read it aloud. Brian called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. The letters contained no threats, just eerie observations and cryptic remarks. Then the watcher began to escalate. One night, while Lisa was unpacking in the kitchen, she heard a soft tapping on the window. She froze, the knife in her hand clattering to the floor. The window faced the backyard, where dense woods loomed. She strained her ears, but the tapping had stopped. When she finally mustered the courage to look outside, the yard was empty. Brian dismissed it as an animal or tree branch. But Lisa wasn't so sure. The tapping came back the next night, and the next. Weeks passed, and the atmosphere in the house shifted. Lisa started having strange dreams, vivid and terrifying. She'd wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, convinced someone had been standing at the foot of the bed. Brian, too, began to feel uneasy. They both noticed small things: doors they were sure they had closed left ajar, lights flickering in rooms they hadn't entered, and the faint scent of decay wafting through the house at odd times. The final straw came one night when they decided to sleep in the downstairs den, hoping a change of scenery might help them relax. At around 2 a.m., Brian woke to the sound of footsteps pacing in the hallway above them. He nudged Lisa awake, whispering for her to stay quiet. The footsteps stopped abruptly. Then came the knock. Not on the door, not on the walls, but on the window directly behind them. A soft, deliberate knock. Brian turned slowly, his heart pounding. Outside, illuminated by the faint moonlight, stood a figure. It wasn't moving, just staring through the glass. Its face was obscured by shadows, but its outline was clear. A tall, gaunt figure, unnaturally thin. Lisa screamed, and the figure vanished into the darkness. The police arrived within minutes, but there was no sign of an intruder. The backyard showed no footprints, and the security cameras recently installed had captured nothing unusual. Lisa and Brian left the house the next morning, staying with friends while they tried to figure out what to do. That's when they began researching the house's history, desperate for answers. What they found was horrifying. The house had once belonged to a reclusive family who were rumored to be involved in occult practices. In the 1972nd, the youngest daughter had gone missing, her body never found. Neighbors claimed to have seen strange lights and heard chanting coming from the property on the nights she disappeared. The family sold the house shortly after, and the next occupants reported unsettling experiences: phantom knocks, disembodied whispers, and shadowy figures in the windows. Lisa and Brian decided to sell the house immediately. But as they prepared to leave for good, Lisa found one final note waiting for them on the kitchen counter. "You can leave, but I will always be watching. Houses change, but I remain. Farewell for now." They never figured out how the note got inside. The house sold quickly, and Lisa and Brian moved back to the city. They never spoke about the experience again. But Lisa still feels uneasy when walking past windows at night. She can't help but wonder if the watcher ever truly let them go. Some say the house still stands, its new occupants blissfully unaware. But those who know its history warn against lingering too long by the windows after dark. You never know who or what might be watching. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want to hear more scary stories, please like and subscribe to my channel.